Hey, this is Zulem Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this tweet by way of international boxing news. A rumored announcement, as previously reported, former WBO junior middleweight champion Jaime Munguia will be moving up in weight and taking on the super middleweight division's own John Ryder. They're finalizing a deal to face each other on October 29th. A huge fight for John Ryder. A win here will bring him closer to another world title shot. Just thinking of world titles,
is Jaime Munguia officially done at middleweight?
He might be. It might very well be that Jaime Munguia's middleweight campaign has come and gone without seeing Jaime fight for an alphabet title. We know that Showtime tried to make a fight between Jaime and Jermall Charlo, but
Oscar was insistent that unless his network broadcast partner DAZN was involved, that fight don't happen.
For what it's worth, I liked Jaime's chances in that fight because Jermall Charlo is yet another fighter who's had a rather unremarkable middleweight campaign in spite of being a champion.
His resume leaves you wanting just as much as Jaime's does.
Jaime's middleweight campaign consisted of fights with Gary Spike O'Sullivan and Triano Johnson, former world title challenger of Poland, Kamil Zeremata.
For a while there, Jaime was ranked at number 1 by way of the WBO. He was actually in line to take on Demetrius Andrade, who has since vacated his WBO title.
He, like Jaime Munguia, seems to be venturing north of middleweight, moving up to super middleweight, and it's expected that he will campaign there henceforth. Will Jaime do the same?
Well, think about it. What reason is there for Jaime to return to middleweight if he beats John Ryder?
What reason would there be to go back? Go back for what? Go back to fight who?
Yanni Bekalim Kanuli?
Don't misunderstand me. I'd love to see that fight if they could get it over the line. I'm just questioning whether or not they can. I'm just questioning whether or not Jaime and his team will make the decision to go back down to middleweight beyond this John Ryder fight if they are successful.
To be honest, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Jaime stay at super middleweight beyond this fight.
Because outside of a Gennady Golovkin fight, a Gennady Golovkin title shot, Gennady Golovkin who still reigns as a unified middleweight champion, outside of that, there really are no big money fights there for Jaime Munguia, so both he and his handlers might decide to stay at super middleweight moving forward.
Yeah, they might, unless they can get a Gennady Golovkin fight after Gennady faces Canelo for the 3rd time.
And depending on how that goes, depending on whether or not Gennady decides to call it a career after that fight and whatever he endures in that fight, it really all depends. It's immaterial. It's in the air. We don't know, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Jaime stay at super middleweight moving forward because there really are no big money fights and big names at middleweight anymore. He's taking on John Ryder in a fight that, at least to me, is a good fight.
It's a good fight. John Ryder is no lighter touch. He's experienced, he's durable, he's aggressive.
He's suffered 5 career defeats, though he's only actually ever been stopped once, and that was many years ago in 2015 by Nick Blackwell. John Ryder has shared the ring with hard-punching Callum Smith, and to a lot of people, John Ryder won that fight. John Ryder deserved to get the decision, even though he didn't.
He's shared the ring with Billy Joe Saunders, Rocky Fielding, Nick Blackwell, Callum Smith.
I have to be honest, John Ryder really is no lighter touch. He's no cherry pick. If you're sharing the ring with this guy, you are in for a fight. So as far as the fight, I actually don't mind the fight, even if it's difficult to bring up Jaime Munguia and not automatically levy criticism against him. Because Jaime Munguia, this is a guy with 40 fights.
This is a guy whose middleweight run was abysmal.
This is a guy who was ranked at number 1 by the WBO for a long time, yet he willfully swerved a fight with Demetrius Andrade, the then reigning WBO middleweight champion.
This is a guy who Oscar De La Hoya pulled out of a Charlo fight, a fight I actually think Jaime could have won.
This is a guy who many people will tell you is protected. He's a protected fighter, or at least he has been. Even if he's about to face a live animal here and now in John Ryder, that doesn't mean that Jaime hasn't been protected in the past. That doesn't mean that he hasn't been guided away from certain fights with certain fighters in previous instances. He has.
So while I might like this fight, there's still plenty of room to criticize Jaime and how he's being handled.
Because it does seem like they've been handling this fighter's career with kid gloves on, even if they're about to let him share share the ring with John Ryder, a very experienced, durable, and aggressive guy, an aggressive customer. A fight between two mid-range to inside guys like Jaime Munguia and John Ryder promises to yield.
It'll yield a pleasing aesthetic. It will be a fan-friendly fight for however long it lasts.
And if by some chance Jaime Munguia can stop John Ryder and make a statement in doing so, that doesn't rewrite history, that doesn't change the past. Jaime Munguia, for the most part, has been guided away from a lot of fights, and the matchmaking needs to be better.
It's my diagnosis. I like this fight, and I'm looking forward to it if they make it.
If they can make it. And if by some chance Jaime can secure the W without controversy, if he can secure the W legitimately against John Ryder, well, that's a very good scalp at super middleweight. It's certainly better than most of the scalps he collected at middleweight.
My diagnosis, yeah, this is a good fight.
Even if the matchmaking hasn't been all that ambitious when it comes to Jaime in the past, when it comes to this fight, this is actually a good fight, an interesting fight.
Jaime's coming off of knocking out Jimmy Kilrain.
Jimmy Kilrain Kelly, and John Ryder's coming off that points decision win over Daniel Jacobs.
I think this is going to be a Golden Boy Promotions show. I don't think for a second Oscar would loan out Jaime for a matchroom show.
No, of course not. Jaime Munguia is one of Golden Boy Promotions' flagship fighters, so in all likelihood, it will be John Ryder crossing over to the Golden Boy Promotions side of things.
That's a disadvantage. Good luck getting a decision over there.
Fair shake, though. Who knows? Maybe Jaime Munguia won't need assistance from the judges. Maybe he can beat this guy and beat this guy decisively. Beat this guy legitimately. Let's see what happens. In men's welterweight news, Angel Garcia on Thurman versus Garcia 2 will knock Thurman out this time.
Yeah, but who the hell's asking for this? Who wants to see it?
More importantly, who's going to pay for it? I haven't soon forgotten that boxing insider Marcos Villegas very recently stated that Fox ain't spending any cash on these PBC cards. So whatever financing is going into promoting those shows, those sparse shows that do happen on Fox, it's not coming from Fox, it's coming from...
According to Marcos, it's coming out of the PBC's own pocket, their own wallet.
Would they look to do the show on Showtime? Would Stefan Espinoza and the people over there at Showtime be the ones financing this fight? If they are so enabling these two former welterweight champions to circumvent a Jaron Boots Ennis fight. In my humble opinion, I'd be more excited to see any one of these two guys, either one of the two, take on Jaron Boots Ennis than seeing them take on each other for a second time. I don't want to see them take on each other for a second time. Their initial meeting, their first fight, was no barn burner. It did not live up to expectations.
Danny Garcia very recently made his junior middleweight debut. Did you go to junior middleweight to fight welterweight?
Because that's what it sounds like, and that's what it looks like. He very recently took on Jose Benavidez, a former welterweight contender who has since moved up to junior middleweight alongside Danny. And
if Danny takes on Keith for a second time as opposed to a bona fide junior middleweight...
well, that's confirmation. Confirmation of what I told you guys would happen. Danny's not going to junior middleweight to take on junior middleweights. In all likelihood, he's just going to fight guys from 147 at 154. The fact that we're still hearing about this fight, and now we're hearing about it from the Danny Garcia, Angel Garcia side of things.
You know what it is and you know what it looks like. These two boys would rather fight each other than take on the young lions at welterweight.
Two former welterweight champions seeking refuge in each other's arms, in each other's embrace.
Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman.
Keith Thurman, who very recently stated, I was the guy calling out Mayweather. Now I'm the one these other guys are calling out.
Yeah, except you're no Floyd Mayweather. Floyd was a 5-division champion.
What the hell are you? And what the hell are you doing these days?
He keeps telling people that he's not a gatekeeper when there's really only one way, just one way to prove that. And that's getting in there with these young guys and showing them what for.
There was a time when the former unified welterweight titleist was a rising prospect and contender, taking the same exact approach to invade the title stage. He is now at a point where he hopes to become a two-time champion, though at a time when the division's young guns appear eager to remove him from the mix. It's whatever. I was young and hungry, young and starving at one point. I know what it's like to bark, Thurman told BoxingScene.com. You have to make sure your voice is heard. Make sure they know you're in the top 10 for a reason. I had to let the world know that I could beat any world champion, any ex-champion.
Do you remember when Keith Thurman used to call out Floyd Mayweather, accused him of being selective?
No, he's the one being selective. Except when Floyd Mayweather Jr. was still around.
Listen, I don't give a shit if you like Floyd or you don't like Floyd. Floyd's career was a lot more ambitious than Keith's. I think that goes without saying.
I was the guy calling out Floyd Mayweather. Now I'm the one that these other guys are calling out. At the end of the day, it's respect. They try to be calling out other fighters if they wanted to, but they know Keith Thurman has respect in this game. They want that too. So I really do understand it.
That whole bit about Floyd avoiding this guy was a myth.
Was always a myth. Keith Thurman was then in line, by way of the WBA, to take on Marcos Maidana, who had won the WBA title from Adrian Bronier. And we know that Marcos ended up losing that title to Floyd Mayweather in what was a contentious fight, a contentious decision, at which point Floyd Mayweather fought Chino for a second time.
Because the first fight was close and competitive, he gave Chino a rematch.
And won the second fight in more decisive fashion than he did the first. Now put your thinking caps on, kids. Given how close the first fight was, had he decided to fight someone else, had he decided to fight Keith Thurman, who wasn't very well known at the time, had he decided to fight that guy, you know what they would have been saying? They would have been saying he was avoiding a Marcos Maidana fight. He fights Marcos Maidana for a second time, so what they say is he avoided Keith Thurman.
Which was bullshit.
Which was bullshit. After those two Marcos Maidana fights, you know who Floyd fought after that? He fought Manny Pacquiao in the most highly anticipated fight at that time. What are you
trying to convince me of? That fighting Keith Thurman at that time was more important than fighting Marcos Maidana? More important than fighting Manny Pacquiao?
Give it a rest, Tuts.
Give me a break.
As stated, Floyd had bigger fish to fry. And because he had bigger fish to fry, that gave way to this myth, this idea that there was something for Floyd Mayweather to avoid in Keith Thurman. Time has shown us that Keith Thurman is not, nor was he ever, the caliber of fighter that Floyd Mayweather was.
Oh, that was bullshit.
So now you have both Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman entertaining the possibility of a second meeting, a second fight, when there is no need for a second fight outside of using each other as safer alternatives to what else is out there in the welterweight landscape and the junior middleweight landscape. That's what that is. But in order for that to happen, in order for that to come to pass, somebody has to pay for it.
The money's got to come from somewhere. It don't grow on trees.
So who's going to pay for it? Fox, that's rumored to not be shelling out any money for these PBC cards at this time. Showtime? Will Showtime enable the both of these fighters to swerve a guy they're invested in? A guy named Jaron Boots Ennis. Is that what they're going to do? Because
that'd be a waste of money. That'd be a waste of time.
They'd be doing themselves a great disservice, wasting their resources on a rematch that no one is asking for, when what they need to be doing is investing in the future of their boxing programming. Jaron Boots Ennis shows he's a skilled young guy with a high ceiling, and time is on his side. And if Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia are going to box anybody on their platform, it should be him, not each other, and not for a second time.
I feel like Stefan Espinoza needs to put the squeeze on Al to sacrifice one of his boys.
That's who Al gets his budget from, after all. He gets his budget from the people over there at Showtime, and if he don't like it, those two boys shouldn't be allowed to box on the platform. Simple as.
You can't just keep frittering away dollars to put on fights that people don't want to see. What are you getting out of that?
Don't enable these two former champions to swerve what young gunners and what young lions are out there.
And if you end up footing the bill for their rematch that nobody's asking for, by the way, that's what you'd be doing. You'd be enabling them.
And finally, in men's heavyweight news, Robert Garcia is pleased with Anthony Joshua's motivation for a quick return.
A lot was made of Anthony Joshua's post-fight outburst.
I interpreted it differently than most. That showed me that frustration, that he really tried and he still cares, and that's encouraging.
When that happened, I was not close to him.
Garcia told Izquierdazo, I don't exactly know how it happened when he grabbed the belts. I believe that he wanted to greet Usyk and deliver the belts himself, recognizing Usyk as the champion or something like that. But then I saw that he went to a corner and threw them on the floor. I saw a little bit of lack of respect, but Garcia feels Joshua quickly realized how wrong he was and tried to mend things. When he came back in the ring, he apologized, Garcia said, We knew, and he knew, that it was wrong. I think it was desperation. As if he didn't want to accept the loss and the fight. But in the dressing room, when we were speaking, we understood his frustration. I feel that he was trying to look for an excuse with the people who were supporting him. Any fighter can feel the same. He exploded and acted in a way that he shouldn't have behaved. But it was something that he understood at that very moment. He came back in the ring, apologized, and then everything had a good ending. The trainer describes what he saw in Joshua in the dressing room minutes after his loss in the ring.
Don't let this latest loss to Alexander Usyk convince you that Anthony Joshua is cannon fodder for anybody else.
He's still a world-class fighter who lost to another world-class fighter, and there's no shame in that in spite of what his critics would have you believe. When he was in a dressing room changing clothes, I could see his frustration, Garcia remembers. He couldn't believe that he lost. He didn't want to lose. Of course I know him. He didn't want to lose. He was still upset, but we were able to relax him a bit. Eddie Hearn entered the room to be with us, and one thing that I liked was that Anthony quickly told him that he wanted to fight again and do it soon. He told Hearn that he wants to fight in November. Hearn replied that he can arrange for a fight in December, not November, but Anthony answered that he wants to fight as soon as possible because he doesn't want to be seen as a loser. He said that he wants to be back soon and win.
He's got the right idea.
He is coming off of 2 consecutive losses to Alexander Usyk, and he shouldn't sit on that and allow it to fester, start questioning himself. The sooner he can get back in the ring and remind himself of what he's capable of, and remind the rest of the world at large, the boxing community, the sooner he does that, the better. The sooner he gets himself back in the winner's bracket, and I believe that he can. He's not cannon fodder.
Yeah, Alexander Usyk beat him 2 times, but everybody ain't Alexander Usyk.
It was something that I liked in him. Regularly, after a tough fight like this one, a fighter wants to rest 4, 5, or 6 months doing nothing, and then resume training for a fight 8 or 10 months later. Anthony wants to fight again in November, but Hearn wants December. I think December is better. For me, that is the attitude of a great warrior. I like that he thinks that way. If the fight is in December, there is not much time left, just 4 months. He can rest for a couple of weeks, but we will keep training and be in better form in December.
It was boxing scribe Steve Kim that once told me that Anthony Joshua...
It didn't take him very long to become a fighter that's only fighting once or twice a year, and this happened for Anthony Joshua in the developmental stage of his career. At 16-0, he was already fighting in title fights, and he's been fighting in title fights henceforth.
Fighting only once or twice a year.
He's only boxed 3 times in the last 3 years. He's been boxing once a year for the last 3 years.
That kind of schedule doesn't lend itself to a fighter's development and a fighter's sharpness. It really doesn't.
So now that he's not weighed down by alphabet titles and the mandates from alphabet organizations, now that he's got wiggle room and he's on his own schedule and not someone else's, perhaps he can be busier. He can be more active.
This could be the first time since 2019 that Anthony fights 2 times in the same calendar year.
That is, if they do get him back out there in December.
Fighting once a year doesn't lend itself to a fighter's development, a fighter's sharpness.
For more reasons than one. The sooner Anthony gets back out there, the better.